When we're expecting a move of God or hoping for one, we often talk about opening the floodgates so that there's an absolute outpouring of God's Spirit. And when we look in Malachi chapter 3, we get a little bit of an insight into how that can come about and the part that we can play. This is what it says, Malachi 3 verse 10, "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it." Let me give you a little bit of a background here, because we're talking about right at the end of that time when in the book of Nehemiah, we discover that he has gone back, as he said he would, to report to the king about all the success he'd had in rebuilding the walls and, bringing Jerusalem back to life again after the exile. And whilst he's away, something happens in the temple. They allow someone who's been antagonistic towards the work of God to actually take up residence in the storehouse. Isn't that incredible? Now, the consequences of that might not be immediately obvious to you, but if someone's living in the storehouse, there's nowhere to store the grain. If there's nowhere to store the grain, then there's nothing to give to the Levites that have come in from the various towns and cities on the outskirts in order to serve in the temple. So no food for the Levites, no worship. And so everything grinds to a halt. There's no food in the house, there's nothing. And so when Nehemiah comes back, he kicks that person out of the storehouse, encourages everyone to bring everything back, and the whole worship is restored. Now, I know we just think about, if I give my tithe, I'm going to see a tremendous blessing coming into my life. But I want to push it beyond the personal, and I want to push it beyond the financial. Because if you look at the background to this and realize that bringing the food into the storehouse actually led to worship, and it led to a whole, breaking forth again into the purposes of God, then you can see what it really means to have the floodgates open. And we need to do that. Let's be generous in our giving. But it's not about selfishly looking for more. It's about seeing the floodgates open and seeing the blessing of God poured out in ways that we just couldn't possibly imagine.